first and foremost would be, I guess, the departure of Leslie Frazier and McDermott taking over the defensive coordinator role and the play calling duties. So I guess just kind of your thoughts on what you expect from the defense. Do you have concerns about McDermott putting too much on his plate, while he's trying to manage a game, everything like that? Do you think it's going to be net positive, net negative, or kind of stay about the same?
I thought it was interesting, first of all, that like it happened when it did. The timing of Leslie Frazier leaving, supposedly of something that he wanted to do, not something that he was forced to do, allegedly. The timing was off. I'm wondering if, McDermott is watching this game wanting the Bills to be more aggressive like we all are on defense and just not seeing that. Um, I mean, Leslie Frazier still had a great defense. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't think he's the reason why the Bills didn't win that playoff game against the Bengals, but I think that there's definitely room for improvement. What I found was odd too is that the fact that he didn't promote Eric Washington to defensive coordinator, because Eric Washington was a defensive coordinator in Carolina. He was under McDermott. Like, that's odd. McDermott must really look at this defense and want to put his stamp on it, even if it does take away from his ability to call games as a head coach or be able to manage the clock or whatever he does, from, moment to moment. So I will say what you said earlier about being slightly cautious about him doing that is, it worries me a little bit. It worries me a little bit because he's never done it necessarily. He's definitely never done it. He's never done it while he's been a head coach, and this is the only place he's been a head coach. So he's always had a defensive coordinator. He's always had Leslie Frazier, I believe, too. I don't think he's ever had another defensive coordinator. So this is uncharted territory. I'm a little bit worried about the guy who you could argue is part of the reason why we've lost in the postseason the last few seasons, going back to 13 seconds, going back to the game plan with the Bengals. I mean, everything was all out of sorts. There's always a reason you're going to lose in the postseason, but I am worried about that. I'd say it's one of the most interesting pieces going into the season. If we're not going to talk specific like positional previews, like middle linebacker, quarterback, offensive line, like we already have, like wide receivers, like that's all fun conversation. But like the intangible stuff or the intangible, like it's just we can't put our fingers on how much that's going to affect it. And I'm worried as a Bills fan because I don't have a lot of experience with McDermott succeeding right off the bat necessarily in certain avenues. Like, remember timeouts he was really bad at when he first got here. Remember penalty flags, like, or challenge flags. Like, at one point I remember he was like 1 for 11 or something. Like, that was bad. Like, it's just, but to his credit, he's gotten better, but not without aches and pains. So I'd say that's, we talk about Ken Dorsey, the second year in Ken Dorsey, changing offensive philosophy. It's not so much, I'm not worried about the defense under Sean McDermott. I'm worried about how the head coaching is going to go now with Sean, because I thought he was getting good at that part, like managing a game, and now all of a sudden, like, he's not. We're relying on Eric Washington, which hopefully he can help out, and I'm worried about that. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's my biggest worry from that change is how is it going to go from a game to game mentality, because I think they'll still have good, solid game plans. I think they'll be able to change, mid-game, but it's those small pieces from moment to moment. Should I call a timeout? What should the offense be doing? What should the defense be doing? It worries me a little bit.
Yeah, see, I was looking for you to kind of talk me off a ledge here. It sounds like you're in a similar boat to me. I'll start off by saying, addressing Leslie Frazier's departure. Yes, super weird timing, and I don't care what anybody tells me. You will not convince me that he wasn't very politely fired. I think that, McDermott and Frazier have had, a relationship for quite some time working together. I think there's a lot of mutual respect there. And I think, like you said, McDermott really wants this defense to start and end with him and not, have his fingerprints all over it. And I think it kind of, call it a mutual parting of ways if we don't want to call it firing. But I don't think, and I won't be convinced that the option for Frazier to come back was on the table. I think that decision was made, and it was kind of, all right, let's see how we can do this with as much decorum out of respect for you as possible. So I do think that was an intentional move. And then as far as McDermott goes, just looking at McDermott as coordinator, I couldn't be more excited to see what he does with this defense. Getting your safeties back healthy, getting Von Miller back at some point, Trey White, kind of fully recovered from that ACL. Greg Rousseau coming into his own. He had 8.5 sacks last year, and he missed some time with injury. I just expect big things from this defense. Up the middle, not only do we have Daquan Jones, we were always looking for that consistent one technique when we had Star Lotulelei in the mix, and now we bring in, we already have Daquan Jones, we bring in Big Puna, just all kind of similar to the offense, just like this embarrassment of riches and what you can do with them. So McDermott as the coordinator itself, I'm super stoked to see what he's able to do with this defense. And again, as we talked about Dorsey, and is this kind of a make or break season for him? McDermott could have an even better defense, and they were already towards the top of the league last year too. So it's kind of crazy, having a 13-3 team that was, right up there, top 5 offense and defense, and expecting improvements. But I do have some of my concerns with some of the game flow stuff. Like you said, we saw tons of sketchy stuff with, clock control and use of timeouts. And I think we still see it to an extent, but there has been a lot of growth there. So to me, what does that look like as you're, the defense came off the field, and now you got to talk to the defense and, be looking at what the offense is doing. I think what kind of puts me at ease there a bit is I trust most of the staff that he's surrounded by. Dorsey really being like the most inexperienced, being that he's only in his second year as a coordinator, but he's been in the building. He was the quarterback's coach. We brought in Joe Brady, who has experience as a coordinator. You mentioned Eric Washington. Al Holcomb comes in. So he is surrounded by a lot of guys on his coaching staff that, they're not spring chickens. They've been around this a little bit to have his back. So I'm hoping that as he's kind of able to lean into them a little bit more, that he'll be able to have all that buttoned up. And to your point about Eric Washington, I believe he was promoted to the assistant head coach, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so my anticipation there, I was making sure I didn't get the names wrong, is that this is going to be McDermott's defense. He's going to call the plays, all that. But some of like the sideline stuff where, they bust out the tablet and they're looking at what are we seeing here and all that. I think that's where he's going to lean into Eric Washington as the assistant head coach and, defensive mind in the room, while he's still focusing on being the head coach. And if things kind of get in dire straits, he'd get out of my way, I got this type of deal.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, what McDermott does with his defense to somehow make it better. I have a question for you in a second, but the thing about Leslie Frazier's firing, if we could go back to that for a moment, I agree with you. It makes sense that he would be let go. But the thing that doesn't make sense is why wait a month after the season is done? Like, you lose all opportunity to potentially hire a really good defensive coordinator that just got fired from a head coaching gig or something like that, unless the the idea was always, I'm going to take it over no matter what. Then it doesn't matter whenever you fire Leslie Frazier or get rid of him, because you know that you're always the default, the one to fall back on, right?
Yeah, that was just a very strange situation to me, and maybe that was the case. Maybe, McDermott was kind of like, I'll wait a month before we make this move, so you don't have a choice but me.
Or maybe they're having like those meetings at the end of the season and they're like, I really need this from you. And Leslie Frazier's like, I'm not changing my defense. This is a top 5 defense. And now you're going to tell me that you want me to change it. This is how I've always run it.
Yeah, I could see a type of situation like that where, like I said, it seems like they had like this great mutual respect for each other, right? And then you kind of get into those meeting rooms and he's like, hey man, you do a great job, but I need some like sweeping changes from you. And he's like, I've been doing this for 25 years this way. You can't change me. And kind of push came to shove. And maybe something like that kind of forced McDermott's hand a little bit, where, he was trying to make it work, and then kind of push came to shove, and something had to give, and it wasn't going to be that coach.